Hello, viewers, and welcome to another episode of the Sidekicks podcast, Knowing the Kicks in Science. My name is Walid, and today I'm joined by Alexander and Daniel. And this week, we'll be having a very interesting topic related to potentially deadly drug-resistant superbug, Candida auris. So, some people haven't been able to be introduced yet, so I'm going to ask you guys to introduce yourselves, your name, your program, your career goal, reason for joining Sidekicks, and favorite things about science, and more. So, Daniel, do you want to start?
Sure. So my name is Daniel. I'm currently in honors science at the University of Waterloo. My career goal would be to be a microbiologist or epidemiologist at the Center of Disease Control or any other public health group in Canada or the United States. The reason for me to create Sidekicks was to make a platform where science students alike, such as Alexander and Walid here, can share their opinions and thoughts of science principles that we learn in the classroom and apply that to science that we see in everyday life in the news. My favorite thing about science is that with science, there's no opinions. There's no thoughts on how things happen. It's all explained. There are theories, yes, but many times theories are proven and it becomes fact. For example, gravity. There's no proving gravity wrong, correct? My favorite scientist would be Antoine Lavoisier. This is because Antoine Lavoisier was actually one of the first people to start researching in chemistry, and from his chemistry research, we now have all the foundations of biology, microbiology, all applications of chemistry, organic chemistry. So a very influential man in the world of science, indeed. And lastly, my favorite piece of lab equipment would have to be the EpiPipette, so the P1000 EpiPipette, just because taking any bacteria culture or agar from one, let's say, test tube or from a petri dish to another is just so easy and so precise with that tool. So a very quick and efficient way to transmit to agar, I guess, or to yeah.
Great, thank you, Daniel. Now over to Alex.
Hey guys, my name is Alex. I studied biomedical sciences at University of Waterloo, just like Latin and C.auris, same university. My career goal is to become a doctor, dermatologist specifically. The reason for joining Sidekicks would have to be studying for exams, and Daniel kind of brought up the idea of, hey, I'm thinking of doing a podcast. So I'm like, fuck yeah, let's do it. What a great time, what a great way to spend the summer. Also, kind of distribute my knowledge of science to other people who are watching. My favorite thing about science would have to be just the vast amount of just knowledge out there, and the fact that you can just learn so much, and it's always something new and something that every day that I kind of learn. It's just always something new that pops up. I'm like, oh, that's cool. I didn't know that. Or, oh, I didn't think of that. That's pretty cool. So I like that a lot. My favorite scientist would have to be Dr. Stephen Forsey, the guy who taught me organic chemistry. He was a great professor. I love the man. Props to him. And then favorite piece of lab equipment would have to be a separatory funnel. That's a thing that you use to separate two different things almost in a liquid form. A fun story behind it was me and Walid were lab partners for one of these labs in organic chemistry. We were trying to separate caffeine from tea. And I was dumb enough to not hold the cap together, so a lot of our liquids spilled out, and it just kind of went all over the place. So that's a fun little story behind that, I suppose.
Yeah, we still got good results though. So.
Oh yeah.
So let's move on to Candida auris now, and our main discussion today. So introducing it, it was first found in Japan in 2009. Candida auris is Saccharomyces that has spread across the globe, including Canada and the US. Some, but not all, strains of C. auris are resistant against many antifungal drugs currently used, and the spread occurs many times in the hospital setting through very tightly attaching to surfaces for long periods of time. And C. auris is dangerous due to the fact that it has the possibility of being fatal to those who are immunocompromised, and it has a 30 to 60% death rate to those immunocompromised individuals. And the first cases of invasive C. auris infection was in South Korea in 2011. 3 people were infected, and two of those people died from their infections. And it is currently very hard to identify the fungus in the lab. And this is due to people mistaking the fungus for Candida hamulani, And as of May 20th, 2019, when the article that we're basing our discussion off of today was released, 640 people have been infected in the US and 19 in Canada. And the CDC has labeled this as a global problem. So, first question today, and I'll start by posing this to Alex. Why should we care about this?
So we should really care about C.auris and its like high infection because of the fact that currently it's been spotted in 17 countries, including the United States and Canada. All countries with a very high transfer rate. I don't know, Japan or even China, which has the highest, I think second or most highest populated country in the world, can really spread that really fast. And yeah, because the fact that C.auris has a dramatic and really high rate of transmission, that could exponentially increase into being globally distributed unknowingly, perhaps.
Yeah.
And again, it's one of the main forms of spreading it does is through skin to skin contact. So person to person or person to object, and then eventually object to another person. Our world is highly connected, and because of business environments like handshakes or casual embracements in a casual environment, or touching objects in public places, it's a really it can really spread really fast, and that's why I think people, and especially like the CDC, is taking this very seriously because of the fact that there's a lot of drug resistance, and also because it really spreads really really fast. Yeah, like it's the fungus can spread unknowingly across the world in a matter of days, and especially for people who are immunocompromised in places like hospitals, or people who are sick, have a very high rate of death because of the fact that not only is the rate of transmission really high, but they can't fight off infection because of their immune system being compromised, and their body just can't fight the
Uh,
thing off, really. So that's why I
Thank you,
think we
Alex.
take this
And
seriously.
Daniel, do you think like there should be a way to like stop the spread of this kind of disease from spreading? Like, imagine if it got to Europe and how good their transportation system is, and how interconnected all those countries are. So if it spread across a place like Europe.
Yeah, so I do think that this is really, like, as the Center of Disease Control said, a global problem. And as Alex was saying before, with the highly connected world that we have, it's really like a matter of days or maybe weeks at most that this fungus could be traveling all over the globe. And in terms of how to stop this, I'm not saying specifically that we should like watch for people with symptoms and then quarantine them from a public transport, because that's just going to be too hard to do, first of all, and second of all, as that's not really just. It'd be better to, first of all, when we see these issues, or these symptoms, rather I should say, appear in hospitals, and the symptoms of a C.auris infection, they would be flu-like, but it's very noticeable that they don't get better with time, and with antibiotic use or any kind of treatment that you use for flu, it would not get better, since really this is a fungus and not a bacteria or a virus, right?
Mhm.
So once we see those flu-like symptoms that don't get better with any flu treatments or any antibiotics, we should immediately have that person in a room without anyone else, and we should take special precautions. So washing hands always when dealing with that patient, sanitizing anywhere in that room that the patient is located in, making sure that there's that officials that healthcare workers dealing with the patient wear a gown and wear special gloves, just to make sure that this fungus does not travel, because actually it was reported in this article that there was a hospital in the United States where there was such a bad outbreak in one hospital in one room. Sorry, in a one room of the hospital, there was such a bad outbreak of C.auris that there were spores of the fungus on like roof tiles and on like floor tiles that they had to literally rip out and just scrape off the fungus. That's how infectious really this fungus is, and how contagious it is. So for sure, this has to be one of the biggest precautions you have to take. The main thing also to add on is these precautions can't just stop after the patient has stopped showing symptoms of a C.auris infection, because even after the infection stops, they still might have spores, like spore residue on their skin, maybe, or even, for example, yeah, like mainly having spore residue on their skin. that could easily transfer to another patient, and then that other patient in the hospital that's immunocompromised could start feeling sick and die in a matter of days. So for sure, we have to keep these protocols. And currently, the Center for Disease Control is trying to identify the fungus in the laboratory because, as you said, Walid, it is being mistaken for Candida hamuloni, which is another very common fungus. So it's trying to probably identify this fungus in the laboratory and figure out how to deal with it. As well, they're trying to sequence the genome of C.auris to identify its virulence better, and virulence just being how it infects other people, how it infects hosts, also its contagion factors, right? So how it spreads through skin contacts, and how that can be in such an interconnected world, how that means that it can spread throughout the days, right? Throughout the world in days.
Great, thank you. And so let's go back to the root of the problem and let's just talk about where C.auris originally came from. Daniel, do you wanna explain that?
Sure. So really, C.auris, there were strains of it in many places, right? So there were strains of C.auris in Southern and Eastern Asia, in Southern Africa, and also in South America, right? And currently, even though I said that there hasn't been full genome sequencing, that the CDC is still trying to sequence the entire genome, partial genome sequencing has shown that the strains of C.auris are the same within each region. So let's say if there were like 10 strains, right? So there were 10 strains of C.auris, right? There were two in Southern Asia, two in Eastern Asia, two in Southern Africa, and two in South America. So sorry, let's say there were 8 strains, right? So two in Southern Asia, two in Eastern Asia, two in Southern Africa, and two in South America. Then each of those two strains would be similar to each other, right? But if you look at the two strains in Southern Africa and the two strains in Eastern Asia, they'd be very different. And this shows that really there's a difference in the evolution of C.auris, that some strains then developed, and actually this goes back to looking how C.auris really evolved to be antifungal resistant, that there was a kind of break in the evolution of the Candida species, that some of them became, not antifungal resistant and were actually affected by antifungal agents, but C.auris, specifically some strains, became antifungal resistant. And actually, a reason for this could be the use of azole antifungal agents. So azole is just it's a compound that's made of it's a compound that's made up of a cyclopentane with 2 carbons exchanged for 1 nitrogen and 1 non-carbon atom. So the fact is, these azole antifungal agents were used a lot in the agriculture, and due to just natural selection and evolution, some strains of C.auris broke off the regular Candida strains to be antifungal resistant. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Daniel. And Alex, I'll pose extending question to you. Do you think that science community should put more resources into tracking these strains from the beginning, so before they get to a global problem that threaten?
I would say so, yeah, because like I said, and even like Dale said, it's this not bacteria, but this thing. It's the C.auris. The problem is it just has such a high pathogenicity and it just spreads so fast that imagine 100 years ago when the Spanish flu was around and how back in the day we didn't have that big of an international travel. Just think of how big of a disaster that would be now if that sort of same infection happened worldwide. It'd be crazy. So the problem is, it's like, we really should put a lot of resources into even identifying this, because a lot of vaccines, and even though this is, a much more complex organism as opposed to bacteria or viruses, the first step in identifying and getting some sort of vaccine is identifying what this thing is and like having ways to identify it, but also, sort of understanding where it kind of came from and like specifically what organism sort of like branched off of that. So I definitely think, yeah, like putting more resources into, kind of fighting it, combating it, but also again identifying it, before it kind of becomes a very big issue globally and even locally.
Great, yeah, thank you. And you brought up the pathogenicity, so do you want to go further on that and explain the pathogenicity of C.auris?
Pathogenicity of C.auris, yeah, sure. So basically, C.auris causes infection in the bloodstream, the heart, and open areas. So something like cuts or ears, or just any open area on your face. Let's say, if you have cuts on your skin, it could spread like that. It infects internal organs. So, like I said, the heart, your bloodstream, the central nervous system, bones, muscles, a lot of things it affects, and a lot of problems it causes if your body can't fight it off. And actually, like Daniel said, the symptoms are very flu-like. So you'll get something like fever, you'll get chills. But with the addition of antibiotics, they really don't improve over time because a lot of antibiotics are targeted for bacterial infection. And because fungus is more eukaryotic and far more complex and larger than bacteria, you can't really fight that off. So it's that's definitely one of the ways C.auris does its thing.
And yeah, actually going off that, um, looking at the antifungal resistance of C.auris. So during testing, which they had some C.auris, just some Candida auris strains that they found across the world, right? In those regions that I said, or maybe even in other regions. They took these to the lab and tested it. So during testing, almost all of these C.auris strains were resistant to what are known as triazole antifungal agents, right? So triazole antifungal agents is just tri being three azole molecules, right? So three of the azoles, and the azole again being a cyclopentane with one carbon exchange for a nitrogen and one carbon exchange for a non-carbon atom, right? So the triazole antifungal agent fluconazole, right? Almost all the C.auris strains were resistant to that. So most of the C.auris strains now that are antifungal resistant, almost all of them are resistant to fluconazole due to testing of almost all C.auris strains from the places that they originated from in Southern Africa, South America, and also just around the globe, right? But what's interesting is less were resistant to the triazole agent voriconazole, right? And even less were resistant to the triazole agents posaconazole, itraconazole, and isavoconazole, right? Sorry, by the way, for my pronunciation on those. They're very long names. So, but what's also interesting is that C.auris is resistant to antifungal drugs called echinocandins. And actually, echinocandins are very, very popular now that they're used against many fungus infections. So if you have any fungus infection, commonly, that, like, let's say, for example, a fungus infection within your ear, a fungus infection on your foot, or even in your mouth, then it'd be very common to use echinocandins to treat those. So now that C.auris is resistant to the antifungal agents, echinocandins that are very common, that presents us with a big danger because we don't really know what else to do to treat C.auris infections now.
Great, thank you. And I'll pose this question to either of you. Like, how does C.auris then infect hosts after we talked about it and its resistance? How does it infect hosts?
I could probably answer this one, I think. So C.auris basically infects, like I said, the skin, but more specifically via phorylation through something called virulence factors of lipases, which is an enzyme that breaks down lipids or fats. Oligopeptide transporters, a mechanism within the body, mannose-transferases, so yet again another enzyme, and also transcription factors. So that's kind of factors related to reproduction. But also, all of these basically allow for the colonization, host infection, and also removal of iron from the host. And iron, you might be thinking, well, where would you get iron from the body? But that's all within the bloodstream. And again, one of the things I actually mentioned earlier was it utilizes the bloodstream and the heart, all places where there's a copious and insane amount of blood and iron in the body. And the highest people at risk have risk of infection have intra-body treatments, so something that has use of tubes. So within a hospital setting, something like some sort of colonoscopy or something, stuff like that. People who have already been taking antibiotics or fungal drugs, who've recently had surgery because if you have open cuts or wounds, and let's say even one spore or a fungus came in, C.auris, then it could reproduce, it could cause damage, and also people who have diabetes because of the fact that the blood and the immune system are honestly intertwined. Diabetes, if people with full-blown diabetes, blood is oftentimes cut off in places like the feet or like in really small capillaries. And because C.auris, really has a hard time fighting against the immune system, if there is no immune system because of the blockage of blood thanks to diabetes, well, now it has the opportunity to spread and eventually, go on and do its thing and potentially kill the person.
And actually, going off on that, So there's two kind of distinct there's two kind of distinct infections that we're talking about. So an infection by a member of the Candida species, right? So C. auris, right, would be a member of the Candida species, Candida auris, so hence a member of the Candida species. That infection is known as candidiasis, right? However, what Alex was just speaking of before is that a C. auris infection in the bloodstream, right, the central nervous system, and also internal organs, that's known as invasive candidiasis, which is also known as fungemia, right? So fungemia just meaning fungus in the blood, right? So fung kind of being fungus, and then emia being blood, right? So that'd be known as invasive candidiasis, right? So most of the infections that we were talking about in this article, right? So remember how before in the introduction we were speaking of the three people in South Korea that were infected in 2011. That would be invasive candidiasis, so fungemia. Whereas this normal Candida species infection is candidiasis. Just to put a bit of a difference there, a bit of a distinction.
Thank you very much, Daniel. And yeah, we did talk about earlier, like stopping the problem from the root cause of the problem, but it's a little too late for that. So I'll ask you guys this question: what measures can we take to prevent the spread of C. auris? And now that it's out there in hospitals and public spaces.
Um, well, what's actually interesting, I think, like it is also a measure that we could take as well as all of the measures that I stated before earlier that could be done in hospitals. What's really important is to understand how is C. auris antifungal resistant, because we can say sure, the antifungal drugs don't affect C. auris. Why, right? And the whole thing of science is to always ask why and to understand, right? To be given a truth. So the thing is this, right? Is that C. auris is drug resistant. One reason for it is that's speculated is because it has genes for what's known as ABC transporters, right? So ABC transporters, they would allow for the transport of anything into or out of a cell. So for example, there's a common ABC transporter known as lac permease, standing for lactose permease. This would be in a bacteria cell known as E. coli. It's a very common bacteria cell, and it would allow for lactose to go into E. coli to be into glucose. So all those ABC transporters that are in C. auris, the fungus, that could prevent the actual antibiotic. That could prevent the actual antifungal agent, from actually entering into C. auris and thus preventing it from doing any damage. Also, what's really important is that C. auris forms a biofilm, right? So a biofilm contains what's known as EPS, or extracellular polymeric substance, which is just anything that's on the outside of this biofilm. And really, I should say a biofilm is just a group of cells, right? So if you have like a Candida auris cell, many Candida auris cells in kind of enclosed within a sphere, or a kind of like gathering, right? A guild, if you will. That's known as a biofilm. So the biofilm, as I said, contains EPS, or extracellular polymeric substances, right? And those have all the polymers and kind of just polymers, which just be like sugar or carbohydrate units, right, sticking out of that of that biofilm, right, that prevents the entrance of extracellular antifungal agents. So that prevents the antifungal agents from doing any damage because it can't enter.
Great. Thank
And
you,
actually,
Daniel.
something lastly to add is that it might not be right now that much of like a danger for the antifungal resistant C. auris strains, because it is still possible to treat them with many antifungal agents at very high amounts. If we use many antifungal agents at very high amounts, you could possibly treat some of the antifungal resistant C. auris strains.
Great. And that kind of leads into my next question. Alex, do have the CDC, like health agencies like the CDC, Health Canada, made recommendations for protecting yourselves against the spread of C. auris?
Yeah, as far as the spread of C. auris, honestly, CDC recommends that people who work in the healthcare profession wash their hands and sanitize patient facilities as much as they possibly can. If you work on a hospital, you should be using, let's say, hand sanitizer on a regular basis. But also reporting the fungus whenever it appears, and that's kind of the big thing is understanding the spread, understanding how it's moving. Also, a big factor in trying to stop or even prevent C. auris from spreading too far. And if a patient does have C. auris, quarantine and seclusion is the big key. Is you don't want to keep spreading this fungus, onto the population. You wouldn't want that. And when you have the person isolated, if you are, with contact with them, you do want to wear protective clothing. That is a very big factor. You don't want to get any spores onto your skin accidentally or onto your clothing, and then bring it out to the general public. Also, a very big problem. And yeah, like basically preventing a patient's skin contact. You don't want to be touching this person because, well, now you're going to have some C.auris on your hand, and unknowingly you might, put that C.auris on a doorknob, and that doorknob is, well, people are going to be touching that doorknob, and 50 other people might touch that doorknob, and it's a big exponential increase of spreading and infection onto the population. So quarantining and isolation is a big one.
Yeah, and actually, kind of one question that one kind of overarching question that I was thinking of this entire time of our discussion, and even before, from like ever since reading this article, right, is so we spoke in the last podcast, if you remember, about that tuberculosis, that Mycobacterium tuberculosis strain that was antibiotic, that was that was antibiotic resistance, and we said that how this is a very big danger, right? That this could easily kill many people in Southeast Asia, where it originated from. The Beijing strain, it was called the Beijing case strain of tuberculosis. And we also spoke of, this could be something. This could be the start of something known as the antibiotic apocalypse. That we could have antibiotic resistant bacteria that could easily evolve and be so pathogenic that they could just kill us that they could just wipe out the entire human population. So kind of extinction level event. So do you guys think that this would be an example of the antibiotic apocalypse being upon us?
Yes, I believe that this confirmed our fears that the antibiotic apocalypse is upon us, and that we really must act fast if we want to make sure that everyone's prepared, and we have to educate the public on proper sanitation and antibiotic use, as well as cancel the dangerous rhetoric seen in the anti-vax argument, which is really causing issues in the U.S. right now with spread of the rebirth of meningitis
Measles as
and
well, yeah.
sorry, yeah, measles, my bad, yeah. And in order to prevent pathogenic bacteria such as C.auris from causing large amounts of death and sickness. Alex, do you wanna?
Sure. Just to also correct you, they're not pathogenic bacteria, but pathogenic fungus.
Yes, pathogenic.
Sorry,
Yes, sorry.
my
But
bad. Sorry.
I think to some level, yeah, we should be scared of measures, but at the same time, I don't remember which class this was in, but I remember this quote being mentioned where while bacteria are evolving, so are we, and even if, funguses and bacteria and whatever else are evolving, well, so are we. Sure, funguses might have ways to evolve and, be better at killing us, but I think to some extent we're also evolving at an unknowing level because, well, that's what evolution is. At an level, we are also evolving. And while, yes, it is important to, on our own almost societal level try to stop that before kind of you find out if you are immune or not immune, but it's definitely a fact where, while yeah, we should be scared, I think you know there should be some healthy skepticism as far as, will this kill us all? Probably not. Can it
Yeah.
cause damage? Yeah, definitely.
No, yeah, like that's a good point. Just that it's really interesting to see how, in my view, with something like C.auris, even at this point, sure, like don't get me wrong, it's still a very, very pathogenic and deadly fungus, right? It can kill, we said 30 to 60% of immunocompromised hosts, and that's very dangerous. But what happens if it starts killing people also who aren't immunocompromised? And or what if it has 100% death rate of immunocompromised hosts? In that case, there actually might not be anything we can do, because if we can't treat it, if it's antifungal resistant, and we can't contain it because it has a very high virulence, it has a lot of virulence factors, very high also contagion and virulence in general. So it can it could also transmit very, very easily across the globe, as we spoke of, in a very highly connected world. Honestly, this could be not maybe doomsday, but it could lead to a lot of death happening very quickly in a small amount of time. And that's the thing also, is we don't know what could happen. It is kind of unknown to us, right? That Candida auris could become very pathogenic, or maybe does not have to become that pathogenic. It just stays like this, and it'll just maybe like fade off, right? But what happens if we have something just like the bubonic plague, right? Which killed, I believe, a quarter of Europe. What if that comes back and it's then antibiotic resistant, right? Because it's the bacteria Yersinia, right? So that bacteria Yersinia, now we can just use antibiotics against it. What if it's antibiotic resistant and it's even worse than it was back then? Then it could, and as I said, with a highly connected world, it could easily travel in the waterways. It could easily, well, actually, the bubonic plague traveled through fleas. Right? So it traveled on fleas, right? But still, think of airway travel, how that's so common these days. Easily, we could have people everywhere, right? So, I agree with you, Alex, that it shouldn't be like, oh no, it's the end of the world, like everyone like run, like there shouldn't be like widespread like mania and panic, no, but there should be for sure education on antibiotic use, on really canceling out, as Waleed said, canceling out the anti-vax arguments, just because it does more harm than benefit in my view. That being said, I do respect everyone having their own opinion. Yes, it's not like we shouldn't allow free speech. It's just that we should really educate them on the scientific fact of the matter, which is that the vaccines, do not cause any big side effects in the long run. And something that's really interesting, actually, is I think something that Waleed said is that humans keep creating short-term solutions, right, for long-term pain. So the short-term solutions would be like antibiotics, and the long-term pain would be pathogenic bacteria or fungus, right? But in the end, Mother Nature remains undefeated, and that's with antibiotic resistance or antifungal resistance, pathogenic bacteria or fungus or even viruses, right? And in my view, this is the notion really of natural selection and of evolution, that there's always adaptation, and that in the end, something will always, there will always be change. Nothing will always be defeated. There will always be change. And actually, what's interesting is I just thought of it once Alex said it, is that yes, we can say, oh, look, you see that Mother Nature always wins, but also humans. Think of how much we have evolved. Think of how much we have adapted to our situation, and that for sure we can deal with the challenges that come in the future as long as we're prepared. So, kind of a happy, a kind of cheery note to finish off the podcast.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, this was a great discussion, and I want to leave our viewers with some cool facts trivia. C.auris is actually named due to auris meaning ear in Latin, and C.auris causing an ear infection. And Candida causes the majority of fungus infections in the world, and a candidiasis infection in the mouth is most commonly referred to as thrush, or oral thrush. Thank you guys very much. This was a great discussion. This is another Sidekicks podcast, finding out and knowing the kicks in science. Thank you very much for watching.
Thanks, guys, and we'll see you next week where we talk about another podcast episode. And be sure to catch us in a few weeks where we interview our professor, Dr. Neufeld, and his works in microbial ecology. And for sure, we will have a cool talk on that. So see you guys and enjoy.
Yep.
Hey guys.